I call to order. It's a joint meeting of the Board of Supervisors of the Poinciana Community Development District and the Poinciana West Community Development District. It's Wednesday, September 5th at 11 a.m. We're in the Starlight Ballroom at 384 Village Drive. Before we get started, can I ask everybody please silence your cell phones? First item on the agenda is roll call. For the Poinciana CDD, Bob Zimbardi is present.
David Lane, present.
Bell Land present.
Skip Stelfox, present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, I'd also like to call a roll call for the Poinciana West CDD. Supervisor Brown.
Present.
Supervisor Gasevich.
Present.
Supervisor Bento.
Here.
And Supervisor Case is present. And we also have a quorum, and let the record show that Supervisor Defka is not here.
Okay, next item on the agenda, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got a very large crowd here today, and I want to just go over a couple tidbits before we get into the comments on the agenda. Because it's a large crowd, we're going to have some certain guidelines today. Anybody who wishes to speak about the agenda, and I emphasize that at this portion, will please give their name, address, and also tell us which item on the agenda you'd like to address. Obviously, further along in the agenda, item 5 and item 11, there'll be another opportunity for the public to speak. Item 11 is the comments part where you can address any issue. But for that portion, for this portion of the meeting, only the agenda items should be addressed. The board not only appreciates that input, but they use the reason it's there in that order is so board members can then consider those items as they deliberate about the agenda going forward. And again, obviously, at the end of the item 11, there'll be an opportunity to speak about any and all issues. By the size of the crowd, obviously, there's a lot of opinions and passions that are going on in the community about some items the board has been working with. We understand that. We have an obligation as a board to conduct a meeting in a respectful, courteous, professional manner, and we have every intention to do so. That's why we're going to have some requirements about speaking times, and I would encourage everybody here that does speak to be respectful of the fellow citizens and residents that are going to speak after you. So let's stay to the time frames allocated. Let's keep focused on the agenda items at this portion, and we have to remember everybody in this room is a neighbor. Okay? We all live here together. We're entitled to our own opinions, and we appreciate that. Board members are entitled to their opinions. We're not entitled to our own facts. That's all I can say, all right? So, be courteous with your fellow speakers and residents and neighbors. Let's all be respectful to each other. Let's conduct this meeting. We have an obligation as chairman, Chairman Zimbardi and myself, to do this, to address the business at hand, and we intend to do so. So that being understood, I'd like to proceed. And interestingly enough, Chairman Zimbardi and I have added an item.
Mr. Chairman, before you get to that, just also to point out on public comment that if somebody has comments on the public hearing portion of the agenda, that although it's an item on the agenda, the comments would be more appropriate under the public hearing item, which is number 5. So if you have a comment based on the mailed notice of the public hearing, that would come under number 5, not at the beginning of the meeting. Sorry to interrupt.
No, fine, thank you, George. And obviously, we'll have every opportunity to talk about that at the public hearing. But Chairman Zimbardi and I have agreed to, we've found that Taylor Morrison has some representatives here. And I think the residents would be very interested in hearing what they may have to say in the form of introductions and some of their thoughts. So if they're here before we go to the agenda items, would one of the representatives, Taylor Morrison, care to speak?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to spend a few minutes here. My name is Brian Brunhofer. I'm the division president for Taylor Morrison here in Orlando. I oversee the geography, basically Seminole County, Lake County, Orange County, Polk, and Osceola. We as a company are obviously very excited for the merger transaction between Taylor Morrison and AV Homes. And certainly really excited to be part of this spectacular community. I'll just give a brief introduction. I'll preface my remarks today by we probably have very little to contribute just from the standpoint of this transaction has not closed with our merger and acquisition of AV Homes. And because we are two public companies, we're very limited in the amount of information that we can share today. But I can tell you we are on track to close the merger transaction between the two companies in early fourth quarter, so early October, and things are progressing well there. We are supportive of the transaction as it stands today that AV has led, but as importantly, we will look to spend time in a different forum with all the residents to really talk through and make sure we're all on the understanding as to how things can move forward. And I think that's the important part. We'll provide a forum as we get into October to have more informal discussions, coffee chats, etc., because we want to work with all of you on all this. I think the old adage is God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And I think that's so we can hear twice as much as we speak about, right? So from today's perspective, we're here at the meeting just to listen as to what the questions are. We likely will not be able to respond to any of them, but it's important for us to hear what's going on and the questions that come up in this forum. So that's all I have.
Okay, we're now at item 3, the public comment period about the agenda items. If anybody would wish to address that, please come forward to the mic and state which item on the agenda you'd like to have comment about.
Good morning. My name is Michael Luddy, and I live at 101 Sevilla Court. And after hearing from the representative from Taylor Morrison, I respectfully request that the board seriously consider postponing the agenda and postponing the matters before this board today until we have the closure of Taylor Morrison and AV Homes, and we had the opportunity to shut up and listen to him and to what Taylor Morrison's plans are, and before we move forward with spending more money in attorney's fees or any other fees to protect the residents. And we should clearly know what Taylor Morrison's plans are before we move forward with anything. It sounds like it's going to be next month, just a few weeks away. It would be prudent for all residents, including the board members, to be patient and to wait until we know what Taylor Morrison says. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, can you hear me now? Yes. My name is Marva Ford. I submitted several questions to your board in writing as I was instructed to do at your last meeting. I received a 2-pound UPS package.
Marla, can I interrupt you for a moment? That's not on the agenda.
No, but no, the rest is.
Well, you can, Marla, you may address that very completely and have an opportunity to
Okay,
discuss.
when will that be sure?
Pardon me?
Because the last time I wasn't able to do this.
Well, as I announced earlier, there'll be an opportunity to
Thank you.
address each and every item.
Speak.
Yep,
Okay.
item 11.
Promise? Okay, we'll be looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cindy Clauser. I'm at 440 Bel Air Way, and I just wanted to respectfully comment to the previous gentleman that we do keep this meeting in session and follow the agenda because I think it's very important for Taylor Morrison to understand how we feel today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
My name is Joan Down. I live at 352 Sorrento Road in Galliano. And I am very much in favor of us going ahead and making the purchase, issuing the CDD bonds.
Ladies and gentlemen, let the lady speak, please. Let's show some courtesy. Miss, Joan, please. The only reason that you can speak to that is because Taylor Morrison did speak. So, a brief comment, please, and let's move on.
All of this is tearing our community, our beautiful community apart. And I wish those of you who are booing me and making loud noises, I have as much right to an opinion as you do.
Joan, please address the board.
Joan,
Please address the board. People, let her speak, folks, okay?
Anything I have ever purchased of value, which I consider the amenities would be, I've always had to pay market value for. I didn't get it cheap because it wasn't cheap and it was a value. And my opinion and the opinion of many people that I know are that we should proceed with the purchase. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the board for your time and the effort that you put into all of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Roy LaRue.
It's not on, no. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Roy LaRue, and I live at 211 San Vicente Lane. And I'm very much against the sale. And what I want to know is who here bought a house not having any idea what the market value was? That's exactly what the board has done. They have never had an appraisal done, so they have no idea what the market value is. And who here paid 3.5 times the price of their house? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And I wish you would stop the litigation until Taylor Morrison takes over. It's a complete waste of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Diane Jorio. I'm at 549 Capitino Lane. This is a brazen breach of your fiduciary responsibility to your community. You believe it's better to put our community in debt for over $95 million while increasing our tax bill. There's a lawsuit claiming illegal collection of these fees from AV Homes. Why won't you just wait and see what the outcome of the lawsuit is and what Taylor Morrison plans for our amenities? We are doing nothing but lining the pockets of the attorneys. And that's all I will say for now.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maureen Clancy and I live at 99 Auburn Drive. And I'm just wondering about the dues. It seems like not everybody pays the same exact dues in each household. And I'd like to address that. And when you settle the amenities, how are you going to go about? Are we all going to be paying the same dues? Or some people pay some extra, some not pay extra? And my other question is, why don't we go with a commercial appraiser? It's a win-win situation. Everybody will be happy. I don't know why you're against a commercial appraiser to come in here and appraise Solivita, so everybody would be at ease.
All right, thank you. Let me try to remind the audience again that at this portion of the meeting, we are addressing items on the agenda. You can't even answer some of those questions. Later in the meeting, there'll be an opportunity to talk about anything anybody wants to. But right now, we're addressing items on the agenda. So when you want that opportunity, it will be there in two parts of this agenda. Public hearing, and then at the point of the meeting where everybody can speak about anything. So let's confine the comments now on the opinions and pros and cons to that portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Patricia Schmidt. I reside at 772 San Rafael Street. And with all due respect to our board, all of our CDD supervisors and all present, I want to thank Taylor Morrison for their attendance at this meeting today. And I want to assure you that over the past 12 plus years that I've lived here, we've been an extremely cohesive community with plenty to offer to all. And unfortunately, this division is really having a negative effect on our community, but this is not what we people are normally all about. I thank you all. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, Pat. And also, folks, that when we get to item 11, the open part of the meeting, A.B. Holmes is also here. So if you have any of those questions, they can be directed to them. Okay? Any other comments about the agenda?
All right.
Nothing more. Oh, sure, right? No, Sean.
Hello, good morning. Sean Thornton, 165 Marabella Loop. Item 7 on the agenda. I had to look hard to find something I could talk about. I'll be back later, of course. Item 7 on the agenda, I believe that's is that right, the extension of the asset sale and purchase agreement? Yes, okay. What is the current situation as far as that's concerned? What's the date that the asset sale and purchase agreement has been extended to? By, I guess, both parties.
Yeah, this is what your manager negotiated for you, and it extended the due diligence period for you for your inspections until October 1st.
There is no due diligence, by the way. There's only inspection. If you read the document. Okay, I'll be back later. Cheers.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. That was on. I just want to ask everyone.
Sir, if you could give your name and address, please, and
Yes,
the item on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Dr. V, 2424 Palm Tree Drive. I just want to ask everyone who's sitting right
Sir,
here
which item on the agenda did you want to address?
that we are rushing on trying to get this done by October. I'm against it.
Okay.
I just want to ask everyone who's sitting here, by a show of hands, I apologize, I have paralyzed vocal cord. My voice is not too clear. But my heart and soul are 200% clear. I want to see, by show of hands, who is with me and the gentleman who first spoke here, that this should be postponed. None of this rush of October deal. We need to know what is happening before we make a wise, intelligent decision. There's no need for rush. Show of hands, who opposes it? I rest my case. We are against that proposition. Thank you very much. God bless everyone.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Oh.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for holding this meeting.
Ma'am, your name, please, and
Oh, I'm sorry.
address.
My name is Amy Luther. I live at 267 New River Drive.
Okay, and the item on the agenda that you were
Item
interested
on
in?
the agenda would be, I believe, tied to 7 and 8. And mine is more in the form of questions than it is in statement. question I have is, looking at the board up here, I didn't realize it was this big, and I want to know what you were actually elected to do.
That's a good question. I have no problem with that. There's a point in the agenda where there's a point where the supervisors can comment and where the audience can ask those questions. So we'll be delighted to answer that at that point.
Well,
as far as I'm concerned.
as I'm listening to you make all of these decisions for all of us, it was my understanding, and I just want to have this clarified because I don't want to be making judgments as I'm listening without understanding the whole process from beginning to end. It's my understanding that you were initially all appointed by AV to handle and control the water situations, the the retention pond controls. Is that correct?
Fair question, and like I said, ma'am, we'll answer all those questions in that part of the meeting. Anything you have to come back to the podium. We're not going to sit here and go through each and every board member's view on
Yeah, I believe it was. I just want to make sure it's, a lot of things are hearsay all of the time. It's very important for people to understand how everything originated and proceeded after that. And it was my understanding, or I've been told, that you were all elected to control the retention ponds, and it had nothing to do with any of this that's going on now. And that because you did that, for some reason you've been appointed by AV to make all of these extra decisions for us.
Not
Is
true.
that correct?
No.
Okay.
But as a matter of fact, there's a very clear description, and I don't know if you want to read it here, on the website of exactly what the responsibilities are of the individual board members. It's
Okay,
there.
that's good, that's very good.
Yeah.
The second question I have is, if we go through with this bond approval, we are going to have to open up our amenities to people outside of the community. And I know a lot of people have no problem with that and aren't concerned with it. I have a major concern, and it is a question that I'm hoping the attorney can address. And that is, once you've taken money from the government and they have told you that you have to open up the amenities to outside, people from outside, eventually, or does that not make us a non-55 and over community at that time?
Let me try to respond to that very quickly. George, the old Q&A that addresses each and every one of those issues is addressed as there, is it not? Well, there's another one, revised one, right? The old one's on the website, is that correct? All right, every one of your questions have been answered pretty clearly on the Q&A that's on the website, and there's going to be today on the agenda is also a discussion about revision on that to answer just all those types of questions for the community, because you're not the only one. I mean, there's a lot of people concerned about it.
Well, are you not ratifying all of this today?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
It's not even on the agenda.
It says ratification of Point Santa.
When you get to the public hearing portion, our attorney will elaborate what that reflects.
Okay, that's fine, because once you open it up to one thing, to me, you become a non-55 over. And that's the question I want the attorney to answer.
That's been answered, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Me again, Cindy Clauser, 440 Delaware Way, and my comment, I think, goes with agenda number 8. And it's in response to some of the things I'm hearing today. And again, I think it's important for Taylor Morrison to know that, let me say this, in this age of public and social dissension, that my feeling is that the dissenting party typically is the loudest and the ones who are...
Please, folks, let her speak. Everybody's entitled to be heard.
That's why I'm here today, and several other people that I know. I'm just the gutsy broad who wants to stand up. I am for the purchase of the amenities. Because it is resident controlled through resident elected members of the board. And you have an opportunity on November 6th to vote for the people who best represent who you want to be on the board. That is the time that you can vote for your issue. The dissension that is so loudly brought up in these meetings, I feel needs to be countered by non-dissension, which I represent. I vote for unanimous. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Gary Shula, Executive Vice President, DB Homes. Just a quick comment on the assessment methodology item of the agenda. Just want to make sure everybody understands who raised their hand and has concern and is very entitled to your own opinion. That the only thing the board is being asked to do or even considering doing today is adopting an assessment methodology. No bonds are being issued, no transaction is occurring, and in fact, neither of those things could possibly even occur this year. Taylor Morrison will hear your voice, hear your questions, and have ample opportunity to respond well before anything substantive related to the transaction occurs. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. The only thing the assessment methodology does, it doesn't obligate the board to issue bonds, it doesn't obligate them to do a deal. All it does is give them the flexibility to get something done if that's what ultimately they decide to do. Thank you.
Anyone else? Being none, I think Chairman's report.
Hand up.
Hector Ramirez, 316 Pendular Drive. This refers to the agenda. I was surprised on the agenda that we did not take a few minutes of silence, which I think it would be a good cool down period to honor the great Senator McCain who sacrificed for our country. And
Folks, let him speak.
thank you. I know this is not a political issue. It's just simply that I served along with him and many others. I think it's disrespectful when a man gives his life. We cannot take a few minutes to honor him after the service that he did. Because not many of us endured the torture that he did just to represent America. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think that gentleman makes an excellent point. No matter what our politics is, I think we recognize our military folks and your service that they give. And frankly, I think it's okay to take one moment of silence recognizing the Senator. So if you all please do so, thank you for it. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Okay, it looks like we covered that issue. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I think the Chairman's board will move to item.
Well, yes, we're going to move on now to the approval of the minutes of the July 9th joint meeting. All the supervisors have received copies. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes? Anybody have that? No changes? No. Okay. Do you have I'll do one, yeah, okay. From Point Santa CDD, I have a motion to approve the minutes of the July 9th, 2018 joint meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion's carried.
Okay. Point Santa West CDD, approval of the minutes for July 9th. We've all read them, considered them, evaluated any corrections, changes, deletions. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Supervisor Brown, motion. Second. Second. Supervisor Gesowitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Being none, motion carries.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a public hearing on the First Amendment to the Master Methodology regarding undeveloped land in Point Santa CDD. I'll turn this over to our district manager, Mr. Flint.
Yes, this is a public hearing the board previously. Mike, you want to go ahead and walk through with the board?
Yeah, if I could.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. Members of the board, we've been through this drill a couple times, and all we're here today to do is to amend the methodology that you adopted on December 13th of 2017. It does not change the assessment levels on a residential lot. It simply corrects some of the parcel ID numbers for the undeveloped land that was owned by Avatar, as well as recognizes that there's been 122 additional lots that have been platted that need to be, or should be folded into the methodology, since we had to go through this exercise anyway. So with that said, I've got a presentation that I need to make, and then we have Kevin Plensler from Fishkind and Associates, who is here to outline the First Amendment to the methodology, and then we have some resolutions to consider after we receive public comment on the assessments. But I want to make perfectly clear that as a result of what this assessment hearing is today, there is no increase on a residential lot above and beyond what was approved by the board in December of 2017. That is not the purpose of this hearing, and so if anybody's under the impression that their assessment is getting raised from what it was before, that would be incorrect. All residential lots will remain exactly the same in terms of their annual and maximum debt assessments, which will only be certified for collection if the boards proceed to close on the amenity transaction, which, based on the comments I received, will never happen in October. It's not going to happen in October. We're not even going to be able to get to our bond validation hearing in October. We have a procedural hearing, but there is no sale of bonds that's going to happen in October, or likely anytime near that, because there's the other litigation that's outstanding that the district's not a part of. So I want to be very clear at this point, what the boards are doing is trying to set up flexibility for you guys to be able to close on a transaction at some point in the future if you want to. That's all that bond validation does. It gives you the ability to issue bonds. It does not obligate you to issue bonds. So I want to make sure, before we get into a hearing, that everybody understands that.
Thank you.
On, go ahead.
Mike, could you just clarify, one thing I want to understand totally too, any legal costs that we do go forward with to do this initiative, it doesn't increase any liability for the residents, correct?
At this point in time, we have the funding agreement that I provided to you before, and that provides that some of that will be reimbursed out of the bond proceeds if a lot of different conditions are met. Bond counsel says it's okay. And that there's actually funds to be able to do that. But as you're aware, we've kind of locked in the assessments based on interest rate assumptions. Interest rates have gone up recently, and those costs are capped in terms of how much can be recovered. So, so us proceeding down this path is still funded by AV Homes under the funding agreement. Should the boards choose not to issue bonds, you don't have an obligation to repay that.
Yes, I just wanted that to go on record so all the residents understand that. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to just double clarify that the term assessment gets people a little excited.
Sure.
And this is not an assessment that will go into effect until and if we close on the amenity transaction.
That is correct. So, but it is a lien that you will impose, but it's somewhat of an inactive lien in that you wouldn't actually certify for anything for collection until you needed to actually purchase the amenities.
Right. Okay.
So at this point in time, on July 18th, the Poinciana CDD adopted Resolution 2018-11 declaring certain assessments should be reallocated. On the same day, Poinciana West adopted Resolution 2018-09, which declared its intent to agree with the reallocation of assessments. And the reason why those are a little bit different is because none of the reallocation affects any lands within Poinciana West, because Poinciana West is already completely platted, and there are some unplatted lands in Poinciana. And when you adopted those resolutions on July 18th, you also adopted a preliminary First Amendment to the master methodology. No material changes have been made to that preliminary First Amendment to what you have in your agenda package. There's a couple slight changes which Kevin Plensler from Fishkind can go over, but none of them were material, none of them affected the assessment levels. So at this point in time, there's somewhat of a formality that we're going to go through. I would ask each board for a motion to open the public hearing on the assessments.
Okay, I'll make that motion. Have a second, please.
I'll second.
David Lane, second. So, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion's carried.
I'll do this simultaneously, by the way.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it all at once.
You heard the request, and I have a motion for Poinciana West Board.
I moved over the hearing.
Supervisor Brown, yes.
Second.
Second. Vice Chairman Bento, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Being none, motion carried.
And there will be an opportunity for public comment after Mr. Plensler provides some information. But at the conclusion of this process, both boards are going to be asked to adopt resolutions. There are attachments to those resolutions. Attachment A is the engineer's report dated December 13th, which you already approved in December. Attachment B is the master assessment methodology, which you also approved on December 13th of 2017. And then Exhibit C is the first amendment to the master methodology, which Mr. Plensler is going to create or present today. So I just want the board to be aware of what's coming down the pipe there. At this point in time, I'd ask Kevin Plensler with Fishkind and Associates to come to the podium and present the First Amendment and answer any questions the board has on the First Amendment.
Good morning. Kevin Plensler, Fishkind and Associates, 12051 Corporate Boulevard, Orlando, Florida, 32817. Before you, before the boards, is the First Amendment to the Master Methodology regarding undeveloped lands within Poinciana. And this amendment simply makes some amendments to the true-up calculations associated with the Master Methodology that you have originally worked on and approved. Since you approved that document, a lot's happened in that time. Parcel 5A has platted lots, 122 of them. And in addition, there were some additional edits that we wanted to make that were prudent to make sure we had the best available information with respect to the true-up calculations regarding undeveloped properties. So what we did is we updated that document with respect to the platting of parcel 5A and those 122 lots. We also updated the parcel identification numbers as there's been some changes, as often happens with the property appraiser and changing parcel IDs. And in addition, we provided some additional information that we had there were 2 parcel IDs that were allocated some development and the acres were not correct. So we updated that as well. And ultimately all those calculations were updated to reflect basically the way the development is currently laid out on the ground today. And we wanted to make sure that was reflected in the methodology. As Mike indicated, this did not affect Poinciana West with respect to its lots as they've all been platted or developed, and it did not impact developed or platted lots within Poinciana and those assessment levels. And with respect to the document before you, the July document, there were 2 small edits. There was a text edit on page 3 with respect to a change in date from 2019 to 2017, and then a reference to the net acres of development in the assessment row where I was referencing gross acres, so at least those numbers are consistent within the appendix and the document itself. Those were the only 2 changes from the July document to today, and I'll be happy to answer any of the board's questions.
Kevin, I have one quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned 5A had 122 lots that were platted.
That's correct.
So in table 6 on page 3, the difference between this table and the original table is that section 5A is gone. Is that correct?
That's correct, as well as some additional edits with respect to the net acreage of development. But yes, essentially we moved from 833 to 711. That's correct on a unit count basis.
Kevin, just one quick question.
Is your mic on? Is your mic on?
One quick question. And I know it doesn't affect West, however, does this change, and I know there were errors that are being corrected, does it impact the total number of lots in our plan at this point in time, or does it stay the same?
Those numbers will stay the same.
Okay, Kevin, the lots that are, the phases that are listed in page 3 there.
Yeah, phase names, yes.
So it's anticipated lot count. You're saying that none of those have been platted yet?
That's correct. So that's what we've been told. Those are the estimated development units that would be put on those areas at this time.
So as they are platted, we'll have additional amendments to this?
In that regard, no. But what will happen is ultimately this is the true-up calculation. So in the event that the developer decides instead of developing 711, they only decide they can fit 700, the developer would have to pay the true-up with respect to those 11 units.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just so you're aware, when plating occurs, normally it's kind of self-executing. It's handled at a staff level in terms of the allocation of assessments. Because we had to come back and amend the methodology anyway, it made sense to go ahead and update the unit counts for those along with the parcel ID numbers for the previously listed undeveloped land. So there probably was another way we could have handled that, but we felt it better if we're going to update it and amend it, we might as well get the current unit count.
Okay. Thank you. All right, any other comments?
I have several.
Okay.
Mr. Plensler, I've got many questions for you. I need you to kind of stick with me and put up with my monotonous voice for just a little bit longer. In your professional opinion, do the land subject to the amenity assessments as reallocated receive special benefits from the amenity improvement plan?
Yes.
And in your professional opinion, would you continue to generally describe the benefits to assessed property, including the property subject to the reallocated assessments, to include at least the following? And I just ask you if you agree that that's a continuing benefit that you just signify by saying yes. Ownership and control of the existing facilities and the programming of same by the residents results in increased use and enjoyment of the benefited properties.
Yes.
Additional recreation facilities in the amount of an estimated $11.2 million, the scope of which is to be determined by residents, which results in increased use and enjoyment of the benefited properties.
Yes.
The reduced need for personal recreation facilities and equipment, which results in increased use and enjoyment of the benefited properties.
Yes.
The reduced cost of ownership of the amenity facilities due to the district's exemptions from state sales tax, some local property taxes, and sovereign immunity limits on liability, which results in lower cost of operation of facilities and a decreased O&M assessment lien on the benefited properties.
Yes.
The low-cost tax-exempt financing available to the districts, which is not available to the club, which results in lower capital costs and a decreased debt assessment lien on the benefited properties.
Yes.
Elimination of club fees as a lien on the land within Solivita.
Yes.
The payoff of replaced club fees in 30 years compared to the payment of club fees in perpetuity under the club plan, which reduces the overall capital debt lien imposed on the benefited properties.
Yes.
The fact that the CDD debt assessments are not subject to future increases as are current club fees, which reduces the overall capital debt lien imposed on the benefited properties.
Yes.
The ability to refinance CDD debt assessments in the future, resulting in potential additional savings to residents, which reduces the overall capital debt lien imposed on the benefited properties.
Yes.
The developer's payment of CDD debt and O&M assessments on their land, which fees it is currently not required to pay under the club plan, which reduces the need to assess benefited properties to fund those amounts.
Yes.
The limitation of Solivita grant passes to non-residents, which is currently not limited by the club plan, and which results in increased use and enjoyment of benefited properties and reduces the amount of O&M assessments to be levied on benefited properties by limiting overcrowding, overuse, etc.
Yes.
Amenity facilities are not subject to foreclosure as they are if they're privately owned and mortgaged, which ensures continual operation of facilities, which protects property values within the community.
Yes.
Eventual resident ownership and operation of the sales and administration building, which ensures the manner in which this facility will be utilized, protecting property values within the community from a non-conforming use of the facility.
Yes.
And finally, establishment of a capital reserve fund without materially increasing the amounts paid where no fund has currently been established, which results in a reduced O&M assessment lien on the benefited properties to fund the same.
Yes.
And just to reiterate, by your answer signifying yes, you're agreeing that those are continuing benefits that the property that's being assessed will receive.
That's correct.
and you would consider those special benefits?
Yes, I would.
And in your professional opinion, will the special benefits the lands will receive continue to be equal to or in excess of the amenity assessments thereon as reallocated when allocated as set forth in your master methodology and the First Amendment to the methodology?
Yes.
In your professional opinion, are the amenity assessments as reallocated and the specific reallocated assessments reasonably apportioned among the land subject to the assessments?
Yes.
And in your professional opinion, is it reasonable, proper, and just to assess the cost of the amenity improvement plan against the lands in the district in accordance with your methodology as amended by the First Amendment, which results in the amenity assessment set forth on the revised final assessment roll?
Yes.
And finally, is it your opinion that it's in the best interest of the district and its residents that the amenity assessments be paid and collected in accordance with the master methodology, the First Amendment, and the district's assessment resolutions?
Yes.
At this point in time, does the board have any other comments for Kevin? Does the board have any other comments or questions for Kevin at this point in time?
For Kevin, no.
I will note for the record, before we get into the public comment portion of this, that we did receive, I believe, 6 written comments from 5 people. So one person sent in 2 different comments. They were from William Dalton, Marva and Donald Ford, Edward and Joanne Martin, Christine Cote, C-O-O-T-E, and Richard and Inga Washington. Those have all been provided to the board. You've seen those. There were 2 of those that asked questions. We provided either answers to those questions between George and I, or we provided the information that was on the website, but we actually provided paper copies in case the person couldn't access the website to them. And I think you heard that reference earlier, and you probably hear it referenced again a little bit later. So with that said, I would ask that if there's any public comment on the reallocation of the assessments on the undeveloped land, for those folks to come to the podium. Please state your name, your address, and it would be helpful if you could say which district that you live within so that the boards understand which comments are coming from people in which district.
Mike, one question, just go back to when we got those letters. One of those letters was something about if they had already prepaid their CDD debt, that debt fee, and they were worried about going forward, it would be combined. Did we send them a reply about that?
I'm not remembering that, and George, I don't know if you have, but I mean, I know the answer to the question, but I don't know if they
Yeah, I responded. The person was concerned that the existing debt had been paid off, and they were worried it was going to be re-levied as a part of this new bond issue, and I assured them that the existing debt, that lien has been released. They would be subject to the new debt in the event the board moved forward with the acquisition.
That's good, because there's a lot of misinformation on that. Thank you.
Okay. At this point in time, I'd ask folks to come. Same rules apply that apply towards the opening public comment period. But if you could please state your name, address, and what district you live within, that would be helpful.
Good afternoon. I'm Brenda Taylor, live at 213 Da Vinci Path, which is in the Point Siena CDD. Our CDD board is elected. When you are elected, the residents of Solivita trust you to be fiscally responsible, since it is our money that you are spending ultimately. As such, each of you has a fiduciary responsibility to each and every Solivita homeowner. That fiduciary responsibility includes making fiscally responsible choices, continuing to pay legal fees for items in preparation of a potential sale that may not go through, in my humble opinion, is not fiscally responsible at this time. Purchasing 15-year-old amenities without seeking a truly independent appraisal is not fiscally responsible. It is not a fiscally responsible choice, in my opinion. Accepting an offer to purchase those amenities for $73 million was not a fiscally responsible choice. The funding agreement, if I read it correctly, requires us to repay AV Homes for those legal fees that are still being accrued and advanced by AV, even if the sale does not go through. And maybe Mr. Ecker can clarify that. I did not hear that during the explanation as to what happens if the sale does not go through because maybe Taylor Morrison, who does not have other club plans, decides they're not going to continue with the club plan here, or the court decides the $85 fee that we're paying as pure profit is truly illegal. So now you have another fiscal choice to make. Hold off with any further actions that might increase our legal fees until the court or Taylor Morrison decides if they're going to move forward or if the $85 is legal. Or you can continue to push this purchase through, instead of waiting until you have more information for about another month. Taylor Morrison, the sale's going to be done in October. And then, we'll see what happens there, but there is a chance that the sale will not go through. So I urge you to make a fiscally responsible choice at this time. Wait for the court's decision. Wait to see what Taylor Morrison might do. We all know, we've all read that they are not fans. They don't have club plans. They turn the amenities over to the HOA in their developments. The Solivita homeowners have a choice to make in November, and I'm confident that we are going to make the fiscally responsible decision.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Tony Barron. I live at 213 Treviso, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're talking about, the platting, the unplatted, I'm one of the unfortunate 711 persons that moved into Solivita and found out my non-ad valorem taxes are double for debt to somebody who lives right across the street from me. If you can shed some light on that, to right across the street, we throw a softball, 438, and non-ad valorem, I'm paying 800 and something, because of what was done in 2012 with replatting and then ER units, okay, with the amount of, you're talking about, yeah, you're shaking your head, but I'm paying it, okay? So if you could let people know, is that going to happen again here? Because I hear you say the same assessment won't change, but there's ER units. In other words, if you had 2 houses going into a place like where Teresa was supposed to be, and then you change to single-family home, so then there's like 4 spots in Solivita. People, they might not even be aware they're paying double to reduce that, for that CDD. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Are you familiar with that, what happened? Could you shed some light on that? And is that going to happen? I think it's pertinent with what you're talking about now with replatting, and I heard the 122 units. Am I off base on this, or?
Well, I'm not sure I followed you exactly, but in terms of the existing debt assessments that are out there, the Poinciana West debt assessment is higher than the Poinciana CDD debt assessment. Those bonds were sold about 7 years apart, and there were different assessment levels that went into each community. So I'm not sure which community you live in.
I live in Treviso, Poinciana. But it is a fact, I paid double. There's 711 people in this community that pay double the non-ad valorem.
The O&M assessment on Poinciana CDD is exactly the same for every unit. The debt assessment in the Poinciana CDD is exactly the same for every unit unless somebody in the chain of title has paid down that assessment level. That would be the only way that you would have a different assessment level. And I'm not sure if you're talking about ad valorem, that's totally different.
Non-ad valorem.
Non-ad
valorem. I pay $800 and some dollars. The people right across the street from me pay $438.
Well, can you determine which line item it is? Which line item is different? The non-ad valorem has several lines.
Yeah, I think the
CDD maintenance, maybe.
The question is probably not relevant to this public hearing. The question that is relevant to the public hearing is that going to happen here? And the way that it's currently contemplated, all equally benefiting properties will pay the same debt service assessment. And the only way that would change is what District Council indicated, is if somewhere along the way somebody either chose to pay it off or prepay a portion of that and reduce that. That would be the only way, but it's initially levied equally among all benefiting properties.
Can I suggest that you get together with Mr.
Yeah, I'll be happy to
see if you
look
can
at the
hash out
particulars.
what the issue is.
Yeah.
It sounds to me the only reason that would be is, like you said, part of the assessment was paid down. So,
I'll just say that, I think it would be fair if everybody paid the same. I understand the whole big ball of wax, the assessment stays, say, for example, $10 million, okay? But because of where I live and because of the way it was platted or unplatted and the number of units that were supposed to be there, ER units, okay, I paid double because there was supposed to be like a courtyard thing there. Are you familiar with that happened in 2000? Are you familiar?
I am familiar with that.
Okay.
That was an amendment to the methodology whereby there were less units put on a particular parcel, and they do have a higher debt assessment at Point Siena. You are correct, and George can provide you with the methodology where that was done.
And the only reason I bring it up now is
It
because
is
I
not-
believe it's not, is that the
proposed.
same thing that's going to happen to these people?
No, it's not
Okay.
proposed.
Well, that was it. But thank you for at least.
Yeah, no,
saying that
you are correct.
Thank you, because there are 711 people who paid double.
thank you for that.
Joan Jones, 352 Sorrento Road. With the new plotting of 122 lots, when we moved in 2006, we were told that 30% of Solivita would remain undeveloped property. How has that new plotting affected that percentage of natural land, undeveloped property? And in the future, will they be able to then go ahead and develop any of the remaining undeveloped property at will?
I can't answer that associated with that hearing. All I can say is the number of units that were originally planned and approved for Solivita has been reduced over the years. What that means in terms of where those units go, I don't know, and it's really not the subject of this hearing today. I would suggest that you may want to talk to AV Homes and ask them to look at a map in terms, because we know that what their future phases are, and take a look at that. But it's really not something the CDD can control where development goes. We don't have zoning or permitting approval to be able to do that.
But you are voting now to approve the plotting of the 100.
We're not. We're acknowledging that it has been done. The county is the one that actually approves that.
Thank you.
Hi, and I'm Diane Jorio and 549 Cavitio Lane. I have a question for the gentleman that spoke previously. I think your name is Paul. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Kevin, I'm sorry. Anyway, my question to you is, if you answered yes to all of the questions you were asked, and I can appreciate that, would you have answered yes to the same questions if the price was $50 million lower?
I think that's somewhat of an unfair question, because each one of those was a different special benefit that he acknowledged. And certainly, when you're talking about the benefit that a reduced need to get recreation facilities in your own home, that was one of the benefits. That is whether the amenities are provided or not. It's irregardless of the price.
Well, I mean, as I look at it, we already have the amenities. What we get in the future, nobody knows. But right now, I'm asking the question, would we have the same benefits as we have today, right this very second, if we were paid $50 million lower?
And again, two of the facilities that are included within the assessment process don't exist. So that's an impossible question to answer.
It really isn't. It's quite simple, actually. and I would really like an answer. Let's take those two off of the block right now. What we have standing right now, the Palms and the Riviera, what we have standing right now, would that answer still be yes for $50 million less? Can you allow me to answer, please? Thank you.
To Mike's point, to the board and to everyone else, it is not, to answer that question, I can't answer that question in that regard. I mean, we're presented as an assessment consultant with certain data and information, and we do an analysis and provide our opinions. If all those numbers change and all those things change, I can't just sit here right now and tell you that's the answer. It's just not how this works in terms of how this process works collectively. I mean, I'd be happy to answer the question if, in fact, that number comes in a different, then we can evaluate it and analyze it and come with an opinion. But at this point, I really can't answer that. I'm sorry, I can't really answer that question. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your concern, and everyone's passionate about the subject, but I just can't answer that currently.
Thank you, Kevin.
A. Luther, 267 New River Drive. I was up here earlier. I hope you can address the questions I had, and I have another concern. The first question I had was the board sitting in front of me. Were you all initially appointed to control the water in the retention ponds? And if you were, how did we get to this position?
The questions that you brought up under the prior audience comment aren't related to the public hearing that's being held right now. There's a general audience comment section at the end, and I think I wrote down your questions. I think we can try to address those under the general audience comment section, but it's not really the subject of the public hearing. You were asking what the board's role was, how they were elected.
Right.
You know, are the amenities public? Is that going to affect the 55 plus? None of those really have anything to do with the public hearing, but they can be things that we try to address later on under general audience comments.
Okay, then the third question I have, you might want to defer to that time, but it might be valuable now. When you are selling the amenities, or Taylor Morrison will be taking over, what did your road study show? How much extra money are we going to have to add to our HOA fees to repair and replace roads? Our roads, some of our roads are in very bad shape, and I belong to two different condo associations.
The HOA is a separate entity.
Separate issue.
Yeah.
Okay, so when can that be addressed?
You could address that to the HOA. They own the roads. The CDD has nothing to do with the roads.
Okay, but if the HOA is turned over to us,
Still an HOA.
Still an HOA question.
The CDD is not proposing to acquire the roads. The roads will remain HOA.
okay, I just want people to be aware that those have not been put into the capital budget for road replacement, and it's going to be enormous. Those will be enormous costs.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Don Swick, 1233 Cambria event in Porterfield.
A little closer, please.
Don Swick.
No.
No, go to your direction. Don Swick. There you go. 1233 Cambria event in Porterfield. I don't know whether that's west or Hello.
That's better. That's better. Get close.
All right.
There you go.
Gentlemen, I don't know the gentleman's name, you asked Kevin several questions, and in those questions, he asked his professional opinion. He didn't define his profession or what his experience is, and he also apparently did an appraisal that was paid for by somebody, so I don't know what his interests were. If we can have that explained to us, I'd appreciate it.
If the board, it's a brief answer.
Yes.
Kevin Plensler works with Fishkind and Associates. He has been retained solely as our assessment consultant. He has not prepared a valuation. He has been the person to look at the improvements that we've been contemplating acquiring and constructing, and then figuring out how to fairly allocate the cost among the people who would be paying assessments. That's been his role. His role has not been on valuation.
417 to Leesley, Ponciana CDD. I had a question regarding the earlier presentation in which there was a list of a dozen or so benefits. I wondered if I had missed something, if in fact there are no risks involved that should also be considered and discussed.
I'm sorry, I could not hear that.
What are the risks? You went through a long list of benefits. What are the risks? Am I to believe there are no risks involved, only benefits? Only potential benefits, no potential risks?
Again,
Can you answer that now and not tell us?
Yeah, I'll tell you right now.
Did you understand this question? I want to be sure you understand it. Say it louder, because they can't hear you.
I believe I do understand it, but if you want to have him say it again, it's okay.
That's okay. I'm concerned that I'm watching a process that points only to benefits, potential benefits, and accepts those as a basis of a decision without regard, and you can correct me if I miss something, without regards to any potential risk involved.
Got it?
Yeah.
Should there not be some presentation of potential risk?
Got it?
Yeah.
You don't have to go to a website?
I'll be glad to answer the question if I can. The reason why we go through the benefits is because under Florida law, in order for a special assessment to be valid, there has to be a special benefit that the property receives. And that special benefit needs to be fairly allocated among the properties that will be paying the assessments. That's the reason why there's a focus on benefit, and that's because the Florida law says you focus on benefit. This board in the past has talked about the risk with the transaction and the realities of running the amenities yourself versus having a developer run the amenities and the different risks that come along with that. So there has been discussion of it, but for purposes of an assessment hearing, by law, we're required to focus on the benefit. But I appreciate his comment, and the board is well aware of some of the risks that are associated with being the owner of the amenities.
What are these?
What are the risks?
Well, the risk would be that you have programming the community doesn't like. The risk would be you have buildings that burn down, you have to rebuild. The risk is that you have a limited political ability to raise additional funds for initial amenities when people want it. I mean, those are all risks that you're going to have to deal with. The risk could be that your O&M expenses go significantly higher. There could be a government regulation that causes your maintenance cost of, for instance, ponds to go significantly higher. So there's a lot of different risks that this board encounters on every month we have a meeting, we talk about some of those risks and how to pay for them, and certainly with the amenities, you would have those as well.
Could you potentially list out those risks in the same manner, even if it's outside of those requirements, but for the benefit of those making decisions about going ahead or not? Could you potentially just list out those for the residents?
Could you please list those out for the residents?
Yeah, I thought I just went through a list of potential ones.
We want the list right, like, we want the 2-pound package.
talk to the mic, please, ma'am.
We want the 2-pound package, like it's in
I
there.
would-
For everybody to receive that. Referring us to websites and your former meetings and all.
Yeah.
We've only lived here 8 months, so all that, I'll be back.
Okay. Well, you can identify and list, and we can talk about. Some of the things you can think of today, but as George and I will tell you from working with many districts, the federal government can pass a regulation saying you have to comply with this within 30 days, and the manufacturer doesn't make the product for a year. There's a risk that you're going to be shutting down, you know, a pool if you don't have the pool.
But most of the
filter
risks,
things.
if I'm not incorrect, most of the risks were whoever owns the amenities.
That's correct.
The risks
It's not unique to
we don't just inherit risks, but if we didn't buy the amenities, we'd be still subject to unknown risks.
And in my example of the pool filter, we actually had this happen. It was to prevent people from getting trapped with their hair in the pool filter, and there were pools that were shut down across the country until the manufacturers could come up with, you know, how they're going to fix it.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Luddy.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Luddy. I live at 101 Sevilla Court, and I'm in the Point Siena CDD district. My question is concerning the current funding agreement between the Point Siena CDD and AV Homes. And as I understand it, this agreement exempts the West CDD community. In April 2016, the PCD board entered into and executed a funding agreement whereby AV Homes agrees to pay for the legal and court expenses for the amenities purchased. This agreement also states that the PCCD board will or shall repay all expenses paid by AV Homes. They have agreed to 3 options for the repayment. 1, the board will issue bonds and use the bond money to pay AV Homes. Secondly, if they fail to issue bonds within 5 years of the signing of the contract, which is April of 2016, the developer pursuant to this agreement shall be deemed paid in lieu of taxes or assessment. The final option, the third option, would be to issue a special assessment to all residents of the PCDD. As of this date, I understand that the expenses are in excess of $1.5 million. And if you divide that amount among the approximately 3,600 homes in the PCDD, that would mean that each of us as residents already owe an approximately $416 per resident. And that would be, you guys, what is the Point Siena CDD board's understanding of this agreement? And what is the plan of the PCDD board to pay for the legal and court expenses? How much has the board obligated the residents of the PCD to pay AV Homes for fees as of today? Like I said, I have an approximate amount. So if you have a better number, I would love to hear. And what will, Mike Eckert, if maybe you can give an assessment as to what you think going forward for the bond validation and the court case, ballpark figure of court expenses and legal fees to cover that, so that the residents would have a idea of what total legal fees might be for the proceeding. And what was the reasoning for the West CDD not being included in the expenses of this funding agreement? Why only the residents of the Point Siena CDD? If the board waits for the Taylor Morrison and AV Homes deal to close, will that require the board starting all over again with the bond validation? Some of the people from the community have stated that if you wait, that they'll have to start the bond validation process all over again. I'm thinking you don't have to start all over again if you just take a 30-day or 60-day waiting period. So when people make that kind of statement, it's kind of misleading, in my opinion. So the other thing is, why not wait? And after hearing Mr. Eckert a few minutes ago stating that, if I'm not misunderstanding, you said the board doesn't have to pay back these legal fees? Is that correct? Is there a new funding agreement, or is there an additional amendment? Because in section 11, under capital, it clearly states they must pay. So I would appreciate some clarity on that. Is the funding agreement null and void? what has happened. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is the third meeting where we've been dealing with the false narrative of what that funding agreement provides. And I believe, sir, you were at each one of those meetings where it was explained. If the bonds are not issued, there is no obligation for any resident to pay any assessments to reimburse those funds. Do you understand that?
If it's your statement that no resident has to pay, that is technically correct. But what it says, the board, the Poinciana CDD, shall, okay? Those are the words, shall pay out of the bonds proceeds or AV Homes.
It's not what it says.
So it's in writing.
Sir, I'm trying to answer your question.
Has the document changed?
Listen, I'm not trying to be cute with saying resident versus district. If the bonds are never issued, neither one of the districts and no resident has any obligation to repay those monies.
Okay.
Do you understand that
I hear
concept?
you, but where in the document does it say that? In section 11, okay, under capital, it dictates the repayment of that loan. Is it somewhere else, because I've read the document that says just what you said. And has the document been amended? Is there a new document? What's changed?
Do you know the difference between paying in the past and paying in the future? Because the language in the agreement says, shall be deemed paid in lieu of assessments or taxes that this board could have levied over the last 3 years to pay these costs. But instead, Avatar said, no, we don't want you to levy assessments on people to pay these costs. We'll go ahead and advance the money. And if the bonds are never issued, there's no obligation to repay because they'll be deemed paid in lieu of taxes and assessments. I've said this at 3 different meetings, and this false narrative that's being advanced to scare people that they have some liability out there for these legal fees that isn't paid through the bond proceeds, it's completely false. I will be happy to sit down with you and show you where it says paid in lieu of assessments.
Yes, I've read that, and it says.
And you don't
they will
understand
take
it.
The AV Homes shall take it as.
Excuse me.
So it's from them.
This is not a place, this is not a place to have this.
You raised a good question again, okay? There's been, and I think our attorney has responded to that again. The Q&As that have been distributed has reinforced that again, okay? This board would not have moved 10 feet towards the direction of closing this deal if we thought we were responsible for those legal costs. We would not encumber our residents to that extent. Furthermore, Poinciana West has a interlocal agreement, because of the 2 boards, that we are equally as obligated and join in this together. It's the whole community. We don't do anything separately, okay? So I think we've addressed that enough, okay? So let's try to move on and get to this issue.
Hi, again, I'm still Diane Giorgio, 54917. I need higher heels. Anyway, Mr. Ford brought up a good question, and I heard the board member discussing the same problems that we could be facing if we do not have a reserve fund. So my question to you, board members, gentlemen, is if we paid a lot less, we would not have to exercise the full bond that we can afford, that we would be allowed to have. So I don't know, I guess maybe I'm just very simple-minded, I'm not sure, but I just think if we didn't pay as much, if we lowered AD's ransom for what it's worth, to bring it down tens of millions of dollars, we would have a lot more money, borrowing power that we could use to make repairs in case somebody got their hair stuck in a pump or one of the buildings burned down. As it stands now, if we go through with the deal at this price, you're putting many of us on a fixed income in jeopardy of losing our homes or as the prospect of future repair assessments loom over us, because inevitable, something will happen. As we can see in the past with all of our properties, things have happened, and it's costing a lot of money. I'm sorry.
Thank you. You do realize that your O&M assessments would be the same whether or not, no matter who owns the property?
I understand that. I know that
And
my
you
assessment.
know that your debt assessment is going to be replaced by a drop in your
Absolutely,
fee.
you're 100%
Okay.
right. But what I'm trying to say is, instead of paying them $95 million, pay them $50 million. We will not have to use the whole bond that we are.
Let me just respond very quickly here, and then we'll get back to the issue at hand again. I don't think there's anybody in this room that wouldn't like it for free. I don't think there's anybody in this room that wouldn't like it for 20 million, okay? Come on, we would too. I wish I paid 100,000 on my house. We wouldn't sell it to me for that number, okay? We have some market issues we have to deal with here. And again, nobody would disagree with that we'd like to take this. But that is outside of what we're trying to discuss right now, which is a public hearing on this particular item that only changes platted lots, okay?
It only changes the
That no
undeveloped
change in
land.
any costs or anything, that nothing can be done until several months anyway.
I understand, but you asked Kevin, like you asked Kevin, a lot of questions about our continued livestock. But what we are not addressing is the fact that we can be putting people out of their homes that do not have the money for a special assessment when something goes wrong. Thank you very much.
Hi, Rich Deacon, Silvio, 166.
I'm sorry, catch your name?
Hi, Rich Deacon, Silvio, 166, Indian Wells. This is directed to the Taylor Morrison person, who agreed to listen with 2 years. And something no one really talks about here, it's about goodwill, something about goodwill. As it relates to our development.
Could you hold it directly in front of you?
Mr.
Just
Chairman.
about 90 degrees. That's it.
Mr. Chairman, I just, if we could hold on just for a second. We've now gone from a hearing based on should we correct the parcel ID numbers for unplatted land to talking about goodwill with a potentially new developer. And while we have that audience comment section at the end for comments to be directed to the board, we're so far off base right now in terms of the assessment hearing. And in fact, I haven't heard one thing related to the unplatted land that anybody has a concern with. Could we please move through this and ask any other audience comments that don't relate to the assessment reallocation that's being proposed so that we can proceed through
Could
the
you please
agenda?
hold this until item 11, please? Thank you. Are there any other public comments regarding change to the amendment to the master methodology?
Patricia Schmidt, 772 San Rafael Street. And you are speaking of Section 5A, is that correct?
That's one of the areas involved.
May I ask the geographic location of that rather than plotting? Is that near the driving range somewhere in that vicinity?
I don't know exactly the neighborhood. Sorry.
I think it's part of Treviso.
I'm sorry?
I think it's part of Treviso and the new area that they're building, is gated within the gate.
I'm not sure what that is.
Okay. Legal department,
The legal description of the area in question.
Yeah, we can provide that to her. I think that would be a better question we can provide to her offline. And it really, again, where did those 122 lots get platted? George and Kathy can coordinate to get a map with the circle around it and show it.
Was that your question?
Yes, I was just curious at the actual location of them. Thank you.
Kathy, can you do that, please?
Cindy Clauser, Oakland, Delaware Way, and I just want to make.
When you hold that up, instead of hold it this way, turn it this way. There you
How
go.
is that?
There you go.
Okay. I would just like to ask that anything being sent to an individual would rather be
put on a common website, unless that person, of course, doesn't have access to the internet, which I think could be clarified ahead of time. Because one of the things I'm hearing in this meeting today is that not everyone understands everything that's going on, and if we have it in one place, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have that. Anything that was sent out was available on the website or in the district's records.
Yes, we'll put that.
With the exception of the cover letter that answered the questions that you guys saw in the comments.
Correct, okay. Thank you. Any other? Nope, there being none?
We need a motion to close the public hearing by both boards.
So moved.
Have a second, please? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Poinciana West, a motion to close the
So
public hearing.
moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, being none, motion carried.
At this point in time, you are kind of sitting as the equalization board, which means that based on the comments that you heard and your own individual thoughts, is there any changes to the First Amendment and methodology that the board wishes to make as a result of those comments?
No.
Poinciana West, any suggestions? No.
Let the record reflect there's no changes suggested by either board. We're finally on to the provision of the agenda. It's the last part of this public hearing.
Yes.
And that is consideration of resolutions imposing special assessments for the Poinciana CDD. We're asking you to consider resolution 2018-16. And I'm just going to briefly describe that resolution. Section 1 sets forth the board's authority to adopt the assessment resolution. Section 2 makes certain findings based on the steps taken to date as well as the evidence presented at today's hearing. Section 3 confirms the authorization of the acquisition, construction, and reconstruction of the amenity improvement plan as set forth in the engineer's report. Section 4 confirms the estimated cost of the amenity improvement plan. Section 5 adopts the First Amendment to the master methodology and equalizes, approves, confirms, and levies the reallocated amenity assessments. Section 6 provides for the recording of an assessment notice in the public records of Polk County, and the remaining sections are administrative in nature. At this point in time, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2018-16 by the Poinciana Board?
So moved.
David Blaine, second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's carried.
And for Poinciana West, we have a consideration of Resolution 2018-13. And again, yours is a little bit different because you're, basically consenting to the amendment, but it doesn't affect your land. Section 1 sets forth the board's authority to adopt the resolution. Section 2 makes certain findings based on the steps taken as well as the evidence presented today. Section 3 confirms the authorization of the acquisition, construction, and reconstruction of the amenity plan as set forth in the engineer's report. Section 4 confirms the estimated cost of the amenity improvement plan. Section 5 adopts the First Amendment to the master methodology and consents to the Poinciana CDD's reallocation of the amenity assessments. Section 6 provides for the recording of an assessment notice in the public records of Polk County, and the remaining sections are administrative in nature. Is there a motion by the Poinciana West Board to adopt Resolution 2018-13?
I move to adopt the resolution.
Motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, being none, motion carried.
Okay, now up to section 6. I hope might be an opportune time to take a 5-minute break, if possible.
Yes.
We're going to recess for 5 minutes, please.